Welcome to Season 6 of How I Made It Through. As I've said before, it is often through pain and suffering that we learn our most profound lessons. It is through courageously exploring the inner landscape of our lives and seeking healing that we transform. Joining me this season is my newest co-host, Bernadette Thompson. Bernadette and I invite you to join us now twice a week as we continue to explore the extraordinary stories of those who've had near-death and spiritually transformative experiences, or are simply wise and old souls sent here to help the collective awaken and heal. Our show reminds us that death of the body does not mean death of the soul, and that indeed we do transition into the wonder of the afterlife and come back again and again and again. Our hope is that each episode will serve as inspiration for your own spiritual discovery. We thank you for joining us in this powerful learning and ask that you subscribe, comment, like, and share. Together, we can spread the growing awareness that we are all infinite souls sent to Earth School at this very unique and miraculous time in human evolution.
Today, we have Mark Anthony, JD Psychic Explorer, also known as the Psychic Lore. He is a fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He is an Oxford-educated attorney, licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. Mark was named a notable graduate by the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science. He is a Spiritual Awakenings International Circle of Honor honoree, and he received the Oh Me Award for Best Psychic Medium. Mark appears nationwide on TV and radio, including CBS TV's The Doctor's Gaia TV and Discovery Channel. He co-hosts the live stream show The Psychic and the Doc on Transformation Network. This psychic explorer travels to mystical locations in remote corners of the world to examine ancient mysteries and the spiritual natural phenomena. He is a featured speaker at conferences, expos, and universities, which include Brown, Columbia, Harvard, and Yale. Mark Anthony is the author of 3 best-selling books. His latest, The Afterlife Frequency, has won multiple awards, ranked as one of the top books about faith, and was up for a Pulitzer. His other best-selling books are Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity. He is also a VP Executive Contributor for Best Holistic Life magazine. Please welcome Mark Anthony.
Thank you, Kristin. Thank you, Bernadette. It is really great to be here. And I love the name of the show, How I Made It Through, because that's something everybody needs help with.
That's exactly right. Well, it's such an honor. I mean, reading that, I'm just so humbled that you said yes to being here, and you have so many gifts to share and to teach. I'd like to start with the beginning because you have, as most people who have these kind of gifts do, really like an ancestry of psychic mediumships. Your parents were psychics. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and what that was like?
The reason I laugh is because growing up, everybody in the neighborhood knew that my family was different. We were kind of like the Addams family in the neighborhood, if you will. But when people hear that my parents were psychics, they tend to think that they were wearing turbans and going around with Ouija boards. My mother was a commercial illustrator and an artist, and my dad had been a U.S. Navy SEAL and was a NASA aerospace engineer. So we were pretty mainstream. It's just that there was this metaphysical bent to it. And I've tracked the psychic abilities in my family back into the 1890s on both sides of the family. And I work a lot with scientists who study psychics and mediums, as well as survival of consciousness in the afterlife. It appears that this is a genetically inherited trait, but we all have genetically inherited traits. I mean, there's a reason why you look like your parents. There's a reason that in some family, there's a lot of left-handed people because that's what's known as a recessive genetic trait, meaning it can skip a generation or two. And in my family, psychic and mediumistic abilities appear to be or are a recessive genetic trait. But when you get 2 parents with the same recessive trait, then the likelihood one of their children is going to have that increases, and that would be me. I have an older brother and an older sister, and they have a good sense of intuition, and they're good at sort of feeling about things that are going to happen. But I appear to have gotten the full package of the psychic and the mediumship. And my childhood was colorful and interesting, to say the least.
Well, you can't just stop with colorful and interesting. Can you share a story that is colorful and interesting to give it a little bit more texture?
When did you start to recognize, or when did your parents notice that this was going on?
I was about 3.5 years old, and I started interacting with my invisible friends. And I remember mom and dad, all of a sudden, they could see who I was interacting with. So, because it's not unusual for toddlers to have make-believe friends. So I'm sitting there, talking to this spirit and that spirit, and mom goes, "Oh my gosh, he's got it." And then dad says, as only a sailor could, several colorful metaphors followed by, "He's got it." And their reactions were very different, but it's also, there's good reasons for that. My mother's side of the family is of Italian descent. Her father was actually born in Italy, and her maternal grandparents came from Italy. And her maternal great-grandmother, Giovanna, had come to the United States from Italy, and she was known in the Italian-American community of North Jersey and New York City as the woman who knows things. And the Italians looked at this as a gift of the Holy Spirit, a gift from God. And Catholic Church officials used to meet with my great grandmother to discuss theology and spirituality with her. In fact, even an official as high ranking as a cardinal, and cardinals are one step below the Pope, would meet with Giovanna. And what's really fascinating, back in 2016, PBS did a special about the Italian immigrants that came to the United States, because there were millions of Italians that came. And they actually, in that special, had an entire segment about Giovanna, and they referenced her psychic abilities. And it was really cool watching that on TV. I mean, I knew it was going to be on, and on every commercial break, one of my cousins would be calling me, "Did you see that?" And so that was cool. So the Italians looked at it as wonderful. Meanwhile, my dad, he came from a very conservative Pennsylvania Protestant Baptist family. They're about as white Anglo-Saxon Protestant as it gets. However, he had 4 siblings, 3 sisters and a brother, and one of his sisters, Marjorie, had these abilities, as did his mother, Isabel, and their maternal grandmother, Grace. They were all mediums. And the reason that my dad was like, "Oh, geez, he's got it." My early childhood was pretty rocky. When I was born, I wasn't breathing. I was what's known as a blue baby, and they thought I was dead. And my mother insisted. She started yelling at the doctor, "You work on him!" And they humored her, and they held me upside down and smacked me a bit. And all of a sudden, I started coughing. Then at 3.5, I started seeing spirits. Then at 4, I went into cardiopulmonary failure because I was really sick with septicemia, and I literally died, and I had a near-death experience. And so then at 5, and then I almost drowned, and my big brother saved me twice from drowning, and that's a whole nother story. So at the ripe old age of 5, I'm starting Catholic school. And I remember my dad saying to me, "Don't talk to anyone about this except your mother and I, because people who see things that others don't get taken away."
Wow.
And I was scared.
Of course.
Dad was a tough guy, but I remember he held me and I was shaking. He said, "I'm not trying to scare you." Here's what happened. About 20 years before I was born, his sister Marjorie, who was a medium, she was married basically to a religious fanatic. I mean, he was one of these, zealous, chapter, line, and verse, the devil's everywhere. And he feared her abilities. And he was a machinist. He worked at a steel plant in Pennsylvania. And one day he was getting ready to go to work. Marjorie started having these sharp pains in her diaphragm, in her solar plexus, and she begged him not to go to work. She knew something horrible was going to happen. They had a big fight, and so he, fine, I'll stay home. Well, that day, a crane was lifting thousands of pounds of steel beams, and the cable snapped, and the beams fell and crushed the machine shop that he worked in and killed everybody in it. Now, yeah, so you think he would have been thankful. Instead, it increased his fear. He saw this prophecy as some form of demonic intervention. I mean, the guy definitely was not dealing with a full deck, in my opinion. And ironically, he had a psychiatrist diagnose Marjorie as a paranoid schizophrenic. She was forcibly removed from her home, put into a straitjacket, and then taken to a mental institution where she was held there for over 6 months and subjected to electroshock therapy of her brain. They did so much damage to her brain that she never spoke about seeing spirits or the future again. And this is one of the great tragedies, I believe, in my family. And I never met my Aunt Marjorie. I never met her in this world. I've seen her a lot. She comes to me quite a bit, and I write about her in my books because she's a really beautiful spirit that comes to me. And the thing is, mediums have been persecuted throughout history. I mean, look at Joan of Arc, burned at the stake because she, heard voices. And up until the 1950s and early 1960s, mediumship, people like me were taken to mental institutions and subjected to all these things. And so my father was not being unkind or mean to me. He was worried. And I'll tell you, my dad, he was a Navy SEAL, but he was a dad to the fingertips. And it was all about protecting his family, protecting his kids, his little boy. And so I saw why he told me that, because here I am, 5 years old, and I started first grade, and I'm in Catholic school, and I figure, they're talking about angels and saints and all these invisible entities. And then I'm hearing the other things that they're saying, and I thought, yeah, good idea. Let's not talk about this. So so that's why, like, when you ask me about my childhood, there's a lot more. Like, when I was a teenager, teenage boys are always up to something, not necessarily bad, but we're guys, we're always doing things, and teenage girls are up to stuff too. When your parents are psychic, you think I could get away with anything? So where were you? And I'd make up the usual lie. No, you weren't. They knew. And I think all parents have that sixth sense, but mine had it on steroids. So
That's funny.
so my childhood was colorful and interesting, to say the least.
Wow. So much, even just getting started. I was, what I think when I think about you, and I've, read, and I think there's so many components, and it's like, where do we begin? I will ask, so did you grow up thinking that, okay, I have these abilities, but I'm going to go become a lawyer because, I need a steady job? Like what?
Well,
I was just curious how you went from, taking that through to where you are.
Yeah, it does. It is a rather ironic type of career choice. But initially, I thought I was going to go into the clergy. And I was considering that because it's not unusual for mediums to be drawn to the spiritual. And in one of the lectures, I have several different lectures that I give. And in my Ancient Mysteries series, one of the lectures that I do, which is called Rulers, Royals, Psychics, and Spirits, the Mystics Behind the Thrones of Power, I go into how several of the saints in the Catholic religion exhibited what we now know as psychic and mediumistic ability. So the Vatican has known about this stuff for a long time. And I thought that this is where I needed to be. I mean, think about it. If you were a young St. Francis or a young St. Clare of Assisi and you had these abilities, If you walked around medieval Italy going, I see dead people, you ended up getting burned at the stake. But if you join the clergy, they became visions of the Holy Spirit. Okay. Well, I felt that going into organized religion as a cleric or as a priest had too many rules and regulations. And with the skill set that I had, I felt law would be better for me. And now that I look at it, it's like rules and regulations. So I turned down the clergy to go into the
That's
practice
funny.
of law, which is the epitome of rules and regulations. But mediumship and being an attorney may seem like polar opposites, but both jobs are about helping people. And believe me, I know full well that most people don't like lawyers. I mean, when you wake up in the morning, you don't say, gee, everything in my life is great, I think I'll go see a lawyer. I mean, you go to lawyers when things are not going well. You need a contract because you're getting into a business thing, or maybe somebody gets arrested, or you get injured, or there's a divorce, or whatever. Okay. So, but a lawyer's job, an attorney's job, is to help people that are going through very, very difficult times of their life. So what do I do as a medium? I help people cope with the loss of a loved one by facilitating communication between people here in our world and their loved ones in spirit. But both jobs also rely very heavily on evidence. Clearly, attorneys need evidence to prove his or her case. But as a medium, I have to produce verifiable facts, things I could not know, not generalizations, but specific pieces of evidence transmitted from the spirit to me to verify the authenticity of the spirit communication. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it's an interesting answer. And what comes up for me as I'm listening is yes, I can see that intellectually, but then I place you in the world within which most of us consensually exist, particularly as a lawyer. And someone comes to you because they're going through a divorce, and you say, by the way, I talk to dead people, right? Like, how do you begin to, you know,
Well, I
to
didn't, I didn't,
the extent
I didn't really make that known too much to my clients, although I had a couple clients go, man, there is just something different about you. And when I first started the practice of law, I was a prosecutor. And a prosecutor, it's funny when I say a prosecutor, so what was that? Okay, prosecutor works for the government. I work for the state of Florida, and we're the ones that when the police arrest somebody, they give us the evidence, and we're the ones that have to bring the case to trial. But there's all sorts of proceedings before you get to that point. One of those is first appearance. First appearance is when people get arrested. By law, they have to be brought in front of a judge within 24 hours. So the judge can determine if they should be released, or if they're released, should there be bail, or they shouldn't be released. And so you get the initial police reports. So when you're a young prosecutor, fresh out of law school, they stick you doing a lot of first appearances on weekends. And, when the senior attorneys don't want to work, and, rank has its privilege. Well, the attorneys I was working with, I'd say, well, that one's a sex offender, that one drug dealer, that one wife beater, that one. And they go, you haven't even looked at the reports. And then they'd be looking at the reports. They go, how do you know this? So it got to be kind of a game to see, before we show Mark the police report, let's see if he can figure out what they were charged with. And then when I'd be selecting juries and doing other things, people would say, this guy knows things that he shouldn't know. So I kind of got a reputation as, I've always been different. We're all unique. Everybody's unique. Everybody is different. But I had this different type of reputation. And then as things progressed, and I would use my abilities in negotiations because I can read auras. And I could always tell when we were going to get a deal based on how somebody's aura was fluctuating and that type of thing. And people say, well, isn't that an unfair advantage? Well, we all have a skill set. Some people's skill set, I know a lot of attorneys who will cut you in two for $20. That's not me. Okay. I think that you can be an effective attorney and be a gentleman, or in the case of a lady, without being a vicious, blood-sucking, aggressive monster. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the practice of law that don't subscribe to that particular philosophy. And I found my ability to sense things about people extremely helpful during jury selection. Anyway, I could keep going on and on with stories, but I just thought I'd.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. So you are sitting in front of people, you can see auras. Is that something that you consciously turn on, or is it already always turned on? Like, can you see that with Bernadette and me right now? Help us understand.
Well, yeah, I could do that. It's a little bit more difficult on camera, because there's a field of distortion, but everything is an aura. I mean, look at the lamp behind me, okay?
Mhm.
There's a glow around it. Anything with an energy field has a glow around it. Well, we have an electrical field, and we know this. This is a scientifically proven fact. Our nervous system, our neural network, operates on electricity. Our brain is only 2% of the body's weight, yet uses over 20% of its electrical energy.
Yeah.
So we have an auric field, an aura, and we've all heard those expressions. And an aura is the energy outline around a person. And there's nothing, to me, there's nothing mystical about this. It's simply a fact. We've heard, oh, he's a yellow belly, a yellow coward. She's green with envy, red with passion. Now, where do you think those expressions came from? When people are frightened, they tend to emit yellow in their aura. And that's where yellow belly, coward comes from. Green with envy. People that are very envious tend to emit a green color, passion. Now, passion's an interesting thing. It can be romantic passion, it can be anger, tends to be red. Look at depictions of saints, not just in Renaissance paintings, but also in Hindu artwork and Buddhist artwork, ancient Egyptians. You see a circle around people's heads. What do you think a halo is? It's an aura. And people who are very extremely spiritual tend to emanate this amazing aura. I mean, if you think like, God, what did Buddha or Krishna or Jesus or Gandhi, Mother Teresa? I had a friend who was a priest. He was a Monsignor, which is just below the rank of bishop. And Father Sonny, I love Father Sonny, and he had the best aura. I mean, just like this beautiful white light. And when he was around, you felt the presence, like the presence of the divine. And he was at the Vatican and he met Mother Teresa. And he said, oh my God, when she was around, you felt the presence of God. And I'm like, if he felt that, I mean, it's like, I can't even imagine what it must have been like to have been. And the thing about Mother Teresa, who is now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, the humblest of the humble. She was. It's like, I know this show's being pre-recorded, but the day that we're recording this is the funeral of a former president, Jimmy Carter. And I met Jimmy Carter. He came to my law school and spoke to us. What a perfect example of what a Christian is supposed to be.
Yeah.
After he never was concerned with material wealth. I'm not saying that the Carters didn't do well, but that wasn't his motivating influence. And after he left the White House, what did he do? He created the Carter Center to facilitate peace, to help eradicate disease. He and his wife personally helped build over 4,000 houses in Habitat for Humanity. Okay. He didn't involve himself in judgment. I mean, I was reading a number of quotes. He said that women need to have an equal place with men in religion. He said Jesus never said anything in any of the Gospels about gay people. Gays should not be discriminated against. I mean, he said all these things. It's like, how can we have peace when we're killing each other's children? He was talking about, the problems in the Middle East. And this is what it means to be a Christian, Christ-like.
Right.
Christ set the bar very high. And Jesus said, be better than me. It's actually okay, talk about setting the bar high. But the thing is, being a true person of faith, whether it's a Christian or a true Hindu or a true Buddhist, is about selflessness, not selfishness. And there's a dichotomy there between the spiritual, which is selflessness, compassion, giving, charity, and self-centeredness, which is ego, materialism, aggression. And so people like Jimmy Carter, people like Mother Teresa, people like Princess Diana, like Gandhi, St. Francis of Assisi, Yogananda Paramahansa, these are the people who show us what it truly is to have that spiritual consciousness mindset.
Mhm.
Mm.
And the aura that comes with that.
And the aura and the people that I've encountered that are these beautiful giving people, it's just you can't but help notice their aura. And that's one of the things I really miss about my mother being here in this world. We'd go out to lunch or we'd do something, we kind of like check people's auras out. We wouldn't invade their energy, but we would notice people's auras. And we were watching this one young preacher one time, and mom says, look at his aura. And he really was. He was such a good-hearted person, and that inner light glowed.
Beautiful. I want to ask you about your title because it's very intentional. Psychic Explorer. What does that mean?
The media seems to really enjoy giving me labels. I was in New York City probably about 15 years ago, and I was at this media conference, and some of the reporters there, they found out that I was an attorney and a psychic medium. So they started calling me Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer. Okay. And I remember my publicist and my manager, they said, well, that'll get you on TV, which it did, because, okay, the psychic lawyer. But what I do in addition to mediumship is I engage in paranormal and supernatural investigations, examination of ancient mysteries, survival of consciousness, afterlife, and near-death experience studies. So I lecture on several different aspects of spiritual phenomenon. Plus, I've spent a lot of my time traveling to mystical and spiritual sites around the world. So this other media outlet started calling me, first they were calling me the psychic Indiana Jones. And I didn't really have a problem with that
Kinda
because,
cool.
I mean, it's like, let's face it, every guy wants to be James Bond or Indiana Jones. I mean, come on. I mean, are
Exactly.
there cooler male icons to be? Okay. But the thing is, they also were calling me, he was an explorer, a psychic explorer. So my manager, myself, and my publicist, we sat down and said, look, it's getting too unwieldy. Let's condense it. JD is like PhD. If it's Juris Doctor, that's my law degree. So instead of calling me Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, also known as the psychic explorer, we condense it to Mark Anthony, JD, my law degree, psychic explorer. So I hope that explains it to everybody.
Yeah, well, where that leads me is then to say, okay, you've traveled all over the world to these mystical places, these ancient ruins or whatever my mind can conceive of. Can you share a story that even given your breadth of experience of like, whoa, that's amazing, that really stands out?
There's several, but okay, this is a cool one. I was in Hawaii in 2018. We were working on a pilot for a TV show, and I was working with the Kahuna, and the Kahuna and the Lapu, who are the priests of the ancient Hawaiian religion. Now these guys are awesome. Okay, and I can't say enough good things about them. Also, how sophisticated the ancient Hawaiian understanding of astronomy was. When you go to Hawaii, the temples, they call them heiaus, and when you see them, it looks like a ruined building because it's like a group of stones that may be like 2.5 feet tall, and there's like a square area. What it is, because the weather in Hawaii is so nice, they don't close in their sacred spaces, but they also use those at night to observe the stars. So think about Hawaii in a pre-electrical time when you didn't have any ambient light affecting that. I mean, the stars on a clear night in Hawaii are just amazing. And it appeared, based on when I was there, that the heiaus were located atop energy vortexes.
Wow.
Now, energy vortexes is like a whirlpool of energy, electromagnetic energy. Several mystical places around the world are known to be vortexes, such as Stonehenge, the Giza Plateau, where the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids are, Machu Picchu. That's another story. But
Yeah.
for me, the ultimate heiau is Mount Kilauea. And when I was in Hawaii, Kilauea, which is on the big island of Hawaii, was in full eruption mode. And she was erupting on a scale that had not been seen in decades. Well, my manager, Rocky, worked her magic, and she got me and our cameraman, Vince, on aboard the helicopter that Smithsonian, Nat Geo, ABC, and all these other outlets use. And it's not like those big, bulky tourist helicopters. It's like a small version of a Black Hawk helicopter, real streamlined. And the 3-man crew, they were the best of the best. The pilot was awesome. The co-pilot was a Hawaiian legend, Mike Pritchard. Can't say enough good things about him. The engineer. So they pack us in. And I'll never forget poor Rocky. I mean, despite being petite, she couldn't fit on board, and just seeing the look of disappointment. So we take off and we're heading towards Kilauea. And even from 30 miles away, you can see the billowing smoke from the waves of the rivers of lava that were going into the ocean. Well, the lava is over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and the heat from that, Hawaii's weather is tropical weather, changes constantly, but this was a catalyst. And the hot air hitting the cold was creating all these ultra hazardous weather conditions. And man, we had a good pilot. So the helicopter is bouncing all over the place, and they're filming me, and I got to say nice and intelligent things. And my stomach is like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my cookies here. And all I'm thinking is, I cannot toss my cookies in front of these big, Air Force, macho guys, so I'm sitting there trying to hold it down, and my stomach's like freaking out. And so we're getting near Kilauea and seeing the waves of lava flowing out of it and shooting into the sky, and along the entire island, giant cracks with steam coming out. And you could see how the lava flow had incinerated forests, neighborhoods, and there was a geothermal plant, which was near Kilauea, which was being used where the power plant, they had drilled deep into the earth so that they could suck the steam out to run the turbines to get the power. And then seeing where the lava is flowing into the ocean, it's boiling the water, but it's creating more land. Now, according to volcanologists, the eruption may have been triggered by degradation of subterranean structures caused by the drilling for the geothermal plant. So the scientist in me is looking at that from strictly that standpoint. Now, in Hawaii, everyone in Hawaii, even the Halleys are the non-Hawaiians, usually the white people, revere the goddess Pele.
Mhm.
Okay, we all hear about Pele. Okay, she's like the super feminine energy.
Mhm.
And in my travels around the world, I come into contact with a lot of belief systems very different than my own, but you have to respect them. And it would be easy to say, oh, this is just a bunch of primitive Pacific Island voodoo superstitious nonsense. But then the Hawaiians look at Pele is not fire. She's not the goddess of fire. She is fire. She does not live in the volcano. She is the volcano. And Hawaii, when Pele is happy, the water's calm, things are good. But when she's not, literally all hell breaks loose. And so we're circling around Pele, and the, the helicopter was bouncing all over the place. And we opened up the door to film. And at 3,000 feet elevation, the intense heat from the lava, I mean, it was incredible. And we're hanging on and we're looking out and bouncing up and down. And I'm, my stomach's like, why'd you bring me here? And I'm trying to keep it together. And all of a sudden, I felt more than this was not just a volcanic eruption.
Mhm.
I felt the most intense consciousness. I felt more than anger, because the chopper pilot says, Mark, what do you feel? Do you feel Pele's anger? And I said, yes, there's anger about exploitation, but I also feel the pain of childbirth and the desperation to procreate. And we were watching lava flowing into the ocean and forming new land. We were watching the birth of land like hundreds of millions of years ago that formed the continents. Now, is Pele consciousness? Is Pele what's known as an elemental, which are non-human spiritual entities aligned with nature, not, that not aligned with people? Was Kilauea a vortex? Oh, I'd say about as big as one as it could be, but there was something there more than just a geological volcanic reaction. There was a powerful feminine energy that was in childbirth mode. So
Mhm.
that was definitely one of the most overwhelming encounters, and I didn't expect that at all.
That is amazing. I have had experience, not, I mean, I've been to Hawaii, but I haven't been to the volcanoes. But I have had, can't even remember the name of the book I was reading at the time, but it was about Pele, and I felt her energy.
Yeah.
And so when you said that, I automatically started, as soon as you said that, I went right back, and I felt her energy on more than one occasion.
Exactly. Let me just one postscript. So when we get back to the Hilo airport and I get out of the plane and these big bruiser guys get out and go, and one of them goes, man, I thought I was going to hurl. Oh, I never felt so good about my masculinity as I did in that point. I was able to hold down, and all these big tough guys, they were going through it too, and I don't want to say I'm not a tough guy. I mean, I know how to handle myself in situations. But I mean, this is one where I didn't know if I was going to be able to contain things. But getting back to Pele is, when it comes to the divine, traditionally, especially in Western culture and in Eastern culture, God tends to be depicted as a male. And as I tell people, God is not a neurotic white man sitting on a throne with a scepter, smiting people for not, tithing 10%. There is a male and feminine, positive, negative, light, dark. And I'm not saying that females light or dark. It's equal and opposite, but there is a feminine component to the divine. And Bernadette, I'm so glad you said that you felt Pele, because when you are in Hawaii and you feel Pele,
Mhm.
there is a very powerful feminine divine energy there.
Mhm.
And I think that we must respect this.
And she was, it's interesting because she was protective of me. That was what I felt, that she was being protective of me. And because I remember reading this book at a time when things were kind of, going through some struggles, and I definitely felt her protection. And it was one of the first spiritual things that was, you put in the category of, did I really feel that? Did I, as you open up, that's what happens, is that but Yes, she is she's always been very important to me. And anytime volcanoes, I'm drawn to volcanoes because of her.
Well,
Mm,
volcanoes, I mean, it's the birth of Earth.
right.
Mhm,
It's the birth of Earth, and I think that's really fascinating, Bernadette, because you felt it. You
mhm,
felt it, and the people that you meet that are living in Hawaii, the non-Hawaiians, they say, "Man, when you're here for a while, there is something about Pele." They all say that.
mhm. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So to segue a little bit, in your book, The Afterlife Frequency, and I think you said even in The Evidence of Eternity, you call something spiritual situational awareness, speaking of Bernadette and her awareness.
Perfect,
Will
perfect
you
example of
unpack
that.
that? Yeah.
My dad, being a Navy SEAL, taught me always to have situational awareness, and that's a skill that military, first responders, and everybody these days, especially, with the active shooters and things, you need to be aware of what's going on around you. And too often, we're looking at cell phones all the time. I saw a post on Facebook. It shows all these people sitting on park benches looking at their cell phone, and Bigfoot is walking by in the background. And the caption said, "This is why there's no recent pictures of Bigfoot." Because everyone's, we're
Well
not
played.
paying attention. But
Yeah.
situational awareness, you pay attention to what's going on around you 360. Spiritual situational awareness takes it to the next level, where not only are you aware of the material world around you, you are aware of the spiritual energy and the energetic fluctuations going on around you. And Bernadette, I can't think of a better example than what you just gave us. You're in Hawaii and you felt Pele. And instead of saying, "Oh, well, I'm just listening to Hawaiians," you accepted that, and then you felt a protectiveness.
Mhm,
Okay. And think about the feminine face of God. In Catholicism and in Greek Orthodoxy, it's Mary, the mother of Jesus, the protective, the super mom. In Hinduism, it's Lakshmi, okay, the super mom. In Japanese Shintoism, it's Amaterasu, the goddess of mercy. So in ancient Egypt, it was Isis, the mother goddess. I hate the fact that that terrorist organization is
No.
called ISIS, because
Yeah.
the goddess Isis was about peace, love, understanding, protection.
mhm,
I think that if there were more moms in positions of power and in political leadership roles, how many moms are going to send their children off to war? How
Exactly.
many moms are going to wreak destruction and havoc? Moms have a protectiveness about them. And I'm not saying that women are a pushover. I mean, look at Golda Meir, Queen Elizabeth I, Cleopatra, Catherine the Great. Oh, there's been plenty of women, but what did they do? They did what a leader needed to do. And women will do what needs to be done. But I think women have a tendency to think when a decision or a policy is going to be implemented, men are very cut and dry. Yes, just do this. Whereas a woman will think, well, how's this going to be received? How will this
mhm,
impact people? How will they feel about it? And I think we need more of that, because
mhm,
change imposed is change opposed. And
mhm.
and I'm not saying this
Well
to be
said.
patronizing. I'm a student of history. I mean, women have been relegated to second class status for most of human history. But there have been a lot of women, like some of the few that I've mentioned, who certainly asserted themselves. I mean, Henry VIII, he's the poster child of misogynistic behavior. I mean, he had, six wives, divorced, beheaded, died,
Mm.
divorced, beheaded, survived. He was absolutely awful. And his second wife, Anne Boleyn, she was beheaded. And part of that was because she couldn't produce a son, and blah, blah, blah. Well, he dies, and then he is briefly succeeded by his daughter Mary, who then dies, and then a very sickly little boy. But then his daughter with Anne Boleyn, who became Queen Elizabeth I. In her reign, she took England, which was a second class power, catapulting it into the wealthiest country in the world, Her navy defeated the Spanish Armada. She outfought Spain, France, the so-called Holy Roman Empire, and the Vatican, and brought England to superpower status for the next 350 years. Not bad for a girl.
Not bad for a girl. Well, speaking of which, would you agree? Because the direction I'm going is about understanding what spiritual messages you're receiving around this time in history. So, a lot of people say we are on either the precipice or in the midst of a great awakening or a great shift. What insights have you gathered or have been communicated to you that you'd be open to sharing if you have any?
One which may be very controversial, but since you're asking, I'll tell you, it was in the latter part of 2019 when I was doing readings for people. Their loved ones had come through and they're always depicted wearing surgical masks. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, and I'd be asking the client, are you like in the medical field or was that person? And they're like, no. And I said, but they keep talking about March 2020, they keep showing me surgical masks. So March 2020 rolls around, I start getting all kinds of emails and calls from people saying, oh my God, now I know what this means, because that's when we all went into quarantine and we're wearing the surgical masks. And then in a connection with spirits, they told me during that period of time, there was a 6-week period when everyone was in lockdown and everything changed briefly. Factories were closed down, planes weren't flying, people were staying home with their kids. Dolphins were spotted for the first time in 400 years in the canals of Venice. The
Yes.
people of Mumbai and Beijing could finally see the skyline because the air pollution abated. Parts of natural forests were growing back and animals were seen in places they hadn't been seen before. And all of the earth scientists were working together to figure out what this disease is and how to counteract it. And the message to me came that you have been given a glimpse of what this world can do. You have the geniuses, you have the technology. If your geniuses, if your scientists will work in harmony, you can solve all of your problems. Think about it. For a brief period of time, I mean, wars weren't breaking out. I mean, Russia, China, the United States, Europe, Israel, everybody was collaborating on this. And all of a sudden, of course, it had to change because money, money, money. And so in conjunction with that, I was also told that the next 7 years from that time, which would be between 2020 and 2027, would be a period of great turbulence, but that the symptoms of the illness had to come to the surface. The symptoms of the illness do not mean COVID. It means everything that's wrong, the bigotry, the hatred, the violence, the materialism, all right, because you cannot identify the illness until the symptoms make it apparent. And I know that there's a lot of people that'll think, oh, he's getting political and all that. This has nothing to do with politics. It was a spiritual message. So we are going through a period of great turmoil right now. And it appears that everything that we're going through is necessary.
Right. Right. I mean, yes, all that corruption, greed, bigotry, like we need to be able to face it and feel it if we are to change it, transmute it, learn from it.
Precisely.
Yeah. And I also get, because I do connect with spirit, that they are watching, like they are really, that they're with us in this 7-year journey, it's not, and that's where this, so much about raising consciousness seems to be coming up, that we're, the more consciousness that's raised, the more we'll reach that point where.
Well, sorry to cut you off.
No, I could not agree more, Bernadette, because that's what I'm getting as well. Because a lot of people, particularly in the New Age field, everything's so wonderful, but no, the world is not wonderful, nor has it ever been. People say, well, when was the good old days? Was it during Vietnam War? Was it during the Cold War? Was it during World War II? Was it in the Great Depression? Was it during the Crusades or the Roman Empire? No. Planet Earth has always been very turbulent, and it's really, really depressing because I've had the honor, I've met Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, John Glenn, Mike Foreman, and Bill Nelson, all of whom have traveled into space. And I actually had about a 20-minute discussion with John Glenn. And that was one of the great honors of my life. And I asked him, I said, he was a senator at the time, and I said, Senator Glenn, when you're up in space looking down on Earth, what was it like? He said, Mark, when you see how beautiful and alive Earth is, and then you look out into space and you see the void, he said, I wish I could get every world leader up in space to see what I did. He said, then we'd have peace. And what's really fascinating is a couple years ago when William Shatner, Captain Kirk, the actor who brought Captain Kirk to life at age 90, and he's still going strong. So kudos, Captain Kirk, live long and prosper. He said practically the same thing.
Right.
When he came off, he was like, you see Earth and how alive it is. And then you look at in the darkness of space, he goes, I didn't see a final frontier. I saw death. And that where we live is so fragile. It's like a drop of water. And I think that it's important for us to realize that this planet, we can't keep treating the ocean as a garbage dump. Pele took out a geothermal plant. Talk about anger. And I'm all favor of alternate forms of energy. But this planet can only take so much. And right now we're seeing this. And I know that everyone wants, use more fossil fuels, use more. But the message that I got is that if all of our geniuses, if all of our scientists were collaborating and working together, instead of figuring out, weapon systems to destroy each other, imagine if they were collaborating and sharing information. And scientists tend to like to do that.
That's right.
Medical research, they want to, because it's all about, hey, I got this idea, maybe you can help, and so they tend to be very collaborative. We could solve the energy problem, we could solve diseases, we could solve food production, we could solve pollution, and we saw it for a shining 6-week period of time, even though the pandemic was going on. And I hear people, it's the pandemic and blah, blah, blah. Look, if you study history, you realize that the history of humanity is loaded with epidemics and pandemics. It's just the way it is. So some of these people need to start actually studying history and studying science.
We're near the end, and you've got me going so much with questions about AI, questions about collective consciousness, personal consciousness, that we are on the precipice. It is my perspective of radical change, and it's going to be up to how humanity holds its capacity for power. Will it be greed and corruption like we continue to do, which really yields destruction, devastation, annihilation, the planet itself? I could talk for a very long time, but I won't because we're running out of time. But as we all are both participants and witnesses, and some people have far more capital, politically, financially, in terms of all sorts of metrics, how does one person listening say, okay, given this unique time in history, how can I participate in a way that is meaningful and positive?
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and I think answer it the way Gandhi said: is be the change you wish to see in the world. Okay, if you can recycle. If you can be peaceful, be peaceful. Treat your environment with respect. I mean, are you going to change the whole world? No, but you're changing how you impact it. I think that if more people were conscious of this, treating each other with compassion. The problem with social media is it gives cowards the chance to be bullies. I mean, people say horrible things about someone you don't even know. I was reading there was a post on Facebook, and it showed a number of movie stars whose houses were burned down in the terrible fires, and people were saying, well, they got enough money, they can rebuild it. Why don't you show the poor people? And it's like, well, that wasn't the point. What they were doing is letting you know that these fires have impacted everybody. But just because somebody is successful, I mean,
Mhm.
their home was burned
Yes.
down. All
Yes.
the pictures from childhood, all their memories, all the things that mattered to them. And it's like, what would those people writing these terrible things have the courage to say that to that person's face? Billy Crystal's home was burned to the ground, and people were saying, oh, well, he can afford another one. And it's like, well, that really isn't the point. They said, well, why don't they show the poor people? Well, yeah, they are showing the poor people. It's just that we know who these movie stars, these celebrities are, and what we're seeing is that this natural catastrophe is not a bigot. It will destroy everything in its way.
Mhm.
Okay. It's like the coronavirus wasn't a bigot.
Exactly.
It'll kill anybody
Mhm.
that isn't prepared for it or doesn't treat it properly. And people need these wake up calls to understand that we are all interconnected, and we're not all going to get along. But if we start treating people the way we want to be treated, isn't that what Jesus told us? Isn't that what Buddha told us? Isn't that what Hinduism, Zoroastrianism? The Hindus have an interesting thought. They say, be nice to everyone, be kind to people, because God will come and walk in human form. So you don't know if the person you're being kind to is God. I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So time goes by so very, very quickly. Thank
Mhm.
you for all that you've shared. And if you've made it this far, please like, subscribe, share, help the channel, help get these amazing stories out there. Um, People want to reach out to you, learn more, tell us more about your recent book. How do they connect with you and learn more?
I invite everyone to visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency. I invite you to sign up for my website. You can find out about readings. I'm on a whole 2025 US tour. You also, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and all times in between and either side, I co-host the live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc. You can call in. I do readings for callers in conjunction with my co-host, Dr. Pat, world-renowned behavioral psychologist. She helps people understand what the messages mean. And we just won Best Radio Show of the Year now 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row. And it's such an honor working with Dr. Pat Basili. And you can find out about all of that at afterlifefrequency.com. And Kristin and Bernadette, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be your guest. It's been such an honor.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.